Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today is the third installment of our Creating Miniature Armies series, and we're going to talk about the Scottish. Before we continue, I'm going to inform you this is the last series, the last installment of the year, but we're going to continue next year, and the list will include free companies, the Welsh, communal, the Low Countries, basically Flanders, etc., the Burgundians, and the Iberian Peninsula. Medieval Scottish, 1333-1453. It was a peculiarity of medieval Scotland that the nobles, having their vast estates lying either side of the English border, often had more interests in common with the English enemy than their compatriots. Whether due to this or the Scottish economy, knights were not overly numerous in Scottish armies, though they fought well enough. The backbone of the army was the common folk, massed in spear block, led by dismounted nobility. This made the army primarily defensive and often suffered by lack of missile capability to keep the enemy archers away from the very vulnerable schiltrons. Something I have to say in parenthesis, after a lot of extensive research, is that the Scottish archers, although few, were said to be equivalent in quality to the English. The Scottish won a great victory at the Battle of Bannockburn, but struggled against a coordinated opponent, especially in open terrain. Early in the next century, the army adopted Renaissance ideas and the pike became the main infantry weapon. So let's talk about the army composition. Now, the army composition for the Scots is quite easy. I mean, you have the commanders up to 6, that's a sword point thing. Nobles, I wouldn't put more than 10% of nobles. Like men-at-arms now, I put 50 to 100%, 15th century. The Scottish armies of the 15th century, of the late Hundred Years' War, were very different. Were all men-at-arms. They were very strong armies. We're going to talk about it in the other cards. But during the late Hundred Years' War, the Scots fielded strong armies with mostly men-at-arms. Then you have commoners. It could be yeomen also, up to 80%. These were usually fielded in Scotland, where you have the pikes and the spears, and allies up to 50%, usually these would be the French. Now, regarding deployment, let's talk about deployment. The Scots actually didn't have a great strategic deployment. I mean, they were the ones who, in the Scottish Wars of Independence, dismounted and won great victories against the English, and after the losses, Edward III decided to dismount the English. But afterwards, the Scots had problems because the English archers basically destroyed the schiltrons. So during the 100 Years' War, the Scottish had some Scottish archers who were supposed to harass the English, but then big blocks of men-at-arms who basically were attacking the men-at-arms of the English. The same here in other ways. They used to have sometimes, especially the late 100 Years' War, the Battle of the Herrings, or even in Verneuil, mounted French knights who were attacking the flank, and the Scots, supported by archers who didn't have great effect, were attacking heads-on the English. So let's have a look now how the Scottish would look. Now, these are examples of Scottish men-at-arms. They could be generic. You can see they have some mails, some padded gabensums. The ones on the right are a bit later, but all of them can be used in all eras. We'll discuss this a bit later. So let's go in basing. My basing, I have 50 by 50, as I used to have seen in the previous presentations, but my first Scottish were based impetus way, 120 by 80. We had 10 when they are heavy men-at-arms, so I can portray the close order, and 8 if they were archers. You can see the photographs of the archers below on the bottom right, where they're based on impetus bases. I like impetus bases, but I'm going to rebase all this now in 40 by 40. So let's go to see late and early 100 Years' War examples. You see the top one, the late 100 Years' War. You see the commanders. You have Douglas and you have Buchan, who are and their retainers who are very, very well equipped. Of course, they were rich nobles, but you see around them the Scottish men-at-arms are generic. They have gabensum. Some of them have part of plates. Some of them small shields and weapons. You see, they can they can play. They can be part of any era. Again, on the bottom you see example of late, and here on the right, left, on the bottom right, you see early examples. But again, this could be used for late as well, because the Scots are a generic army, as they didn't have many men-at-arms and many nobles. Their um, their armor was very erratic, whatever they found, and sometimes no armor in, especially in wars during in England. Again, this is an Scottish archer. You can use him late. Early, I don't know. Early, I wouldn't say. Maybe this is a mistake what I wrote, because the early Scottish maybe wouldn't have uh, chainmail. And there on the right, you see late, they have some pavises, pikes, spears. As I said before, this was their main weapon. Again, here another example of late. You see there bits and pieces. Some have very good armor who are nobles. Some have shields. Some have some good helmets. Some have parts of plate. Very interesting army. I like painting the Scottish. They are very diverse. Again, the example we saw before, early Hundred Years' War. This is closer. You see the difference, but as I said, these guys can be used in both periods. Generally, if you have the Scottish, before I close, you would probably attack in mass with your pikes and your spears, and you would try to overrun your opponent's very strong infantry, especially in the late Hundred Years' War. They were actually the better troops in the Battle of Verneuil and in Beaujeu, where it was a great victory. They were stubborn, they were usually impetuous. The hate for the English made them very close, similar to the French, not to follow orders or not to follow plans. Anyway, guys, this is a bit for me. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll continue next year and with the free companies and the remaining armies of the period. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.